Welcome to another episode of Behind the Agency. This week I have Ben Fox with me, and thanks for coming on the show, Ben.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Ben has a fun background. He built with a partner, FP Digital, for 13-ish years. He also has kind of another side of his business now, ZeroArc.io. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the two sides of the business or two businesses?
Yeah, sure. It's so FP Digital is it as it always has been a managed web operations, DevOps, managed services team. We started with WordPress only, and as we grew up, became more agnostic with the same philosophy of just doing it right the first time, and that a website or a web property is a 5-year project, not 5 months, right? It's something to grow and live with.
Yeah.
And then, about a year ago, I don't know if you've heard about AI, but this whole AI thing, I think it's sticking around. We sort of backed into this partnership with Cloudflare, and I did a very basic business case on the managed security services industry, and looking at specifically at the mid-sized business, so between like 100 and 5,000 employees, which when I think mid-size, I don't think 5,000 employees, but that's what the industry says. And yeah, it's a massively underserved market, and that's dangerous in these days because the attack surface has become so wide. I'm talking about security, all kind, and that coupled with the fact that all of a sudden we can offer, or one may be offered, managed security services that used to be the realm of enterprise. And to a company who maybe has a CISO or has a small but dedicated IT team that just needs more hands or more brain or more think, and also wants to consolidate the 15 different tools that they require to maintain their SOC 2, their SOC 2 certification and their readiness and regulatory issues that come with having a board and whatnot. So that's where I think ZeroArc and Cloudflare have really hit the mark. So those are the two sides of the business, and they complement each other well.
Awesome. Well, when we talked before, we got into a little bit of kind of the origin story, and one of the things that is kind of unique to your story, but I've heard this, a few other places as well, is you have an agency that started with partners, and over time, there's like some clarity that emerges around like both people not being on the same page. I wanted to kind of dig into that. Like you mentioned that your partner, you'd been working for 13 years together. Was there like a specific moment where you realized that you weren't on the same page?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I want to preface this with saying, I don't want to fuzz over the fact that it was 13 years. I mean, Bart took a shot on me, 13 years ago when I had an idea, and he said, all right, like if you can achieve these things, I'll join you, because I needed the tech side at a time really when finding a CTO was the gold. I mean, that was, even now still, but I don't know if you were ever in the tech startup world, but that's what you needed if you were a founder, is a great CTO and someone you could trust. So yeah, friend, partner for a long time. Now, what was there a moment? A couple of years ago, we entertained an offer to sell, and it was a nice offer, and it was a great idea. Someone, we were approached, and it didn't work. But we did a lot of work, and through the work, you kind of end up in this like counseling session together, where you're like, all right, are we going to sell? Are we not going to sell? And if we sell, what does it look like? And what emerged was, what started to emerge, and looking back, it's a lot clearer, obviously, but at the time, I didn't necessarily. I don't know if either of us just didn't want to say it out loud, but Bart was ready to move on and do something different, and I was ready to take a big swing. So I really felt excited and empowered by this idea that I'd be joining a bigger team and have all of a sudden resources and people I'd never had before around me, so I could really dig in. Whereas I think Bart saw it as his way. Well, I know as an off ramp, and there's something, I think there's nothing wrong with either of those things. Just that's when that started to diverge. And when that deal fell through, it was a lot of, for anyone that's been through that, that's a lot of emotional drain. Yeah. So it took a little while to just even come to terms with the fact that, oh, like, you just did all this, because you're basically running two businesses at that point. You're running a business and you're prepping to sell, and it's not like staging a house. It's data rooms and trying to untangle the mess of your books from 3 years ago and all that, and you're really doing that introspection and stress. And so when it didn't happen, it took another, I'd say, 6 months for us to just even really talk about it. And we were busy. It wasn't like we weren't like sitting there crying. We just also happened to have clients and staff and whatever. Yeah. And then it took another, I'd say, 3 to 4 months to come to terms with the fact that we were going to have to find a way to separate anyway, or find a way to not separate. Sorry. It took 3 to 4 months to realize, listen, this is going to dissolve. Like we're on a track and we want to be on that track. So what do we do? We lost a very large client that represented a large percentage of our business. Now we're still growing, but that took a kick in the knees. And eventually we sat down and had a really frank conversation. It was probably a couple of frank conversations, but it's all, in my head, it was one long, back and forth. And I'm very fortunate that Bart and I never had an argument that lasted more than 24, 48 hours, like a disagreement. We always seemed to find a way around it or through it or, whatever. And so having that trust and just understanding that neither of us were dishonest people was really helpful. And so when we started talking about, once it was said out loud, by the way, that's it. So it's the, I want a divorce moment, yeah. But we were like, all right, we're both ready to, we both met someone else. No, we both once I accepted that I had a vision and that he didn't want to be part of it, because I expressed to him, here's where I want to go. And he, for the first time in a long time, said no. And for the first time in our friendship and partnership, I was like, well, I want to do it anyway. Usually when Bart said no, that was a good thing, right? So, as my CTO, because I'm the one that wants to try fun things and not fun, crazy things. And he's the one that's like, I think they're fun. He's like, Ben, we probably shouldn't, go off into the, learn another CMS right now, something like that. So, but this, I had an idea, did a whole business plan, talked to him about it. And he's like, I don't see it. And I totally respect that. And so that kicked off the conversation of all right, so how do we do this? That's what led to it. But it was really a 12 solid years of Bart said to me, I think on one of the first conversations we ever had, he said to me, I don't lose money. In other, so we had 12 profitable years because
that's great.
Right. So it was that sort of attitude of, we're going to charge what we're worth. We're going to find a way to productize our services. That all came from him. And I was handed these awesome ideas to run with and sell, which is my job. So very, fortunate to have found him and work with him. But, now it's, he's moving on and I'm going to take a swing.
Yeah. What is that like? What did that actual buyout process look like? I mean, I'm sure people have their ideas of what that might look like in their situation. What sort of, I guess, stories, or even just for the people who don't know,
so here's what you do.
It looks like.
Here's what you do. You go to the bank. You go to the bank and you withdraw a ton of cash and you throw it into a pile and you light it on fire. and that's no. What does it look like? Well, here's my advice to all you young entrepreneurs: have a really good shareholders agreement. Not one that says the lawyer gets to make the decision when you disagree. Not one that simply says you're 50-50 and you'll figure it out, which is basically what we had. And it seemed like a great idea at the time because we had nothing. I mean, it had a couple of things in it that protected our existing clientele from, for a couple of years, but it wasn't a very good shareholders agreement. From that perspective, no shotgun clause, no drag along, tag along, nothing. So, which is good and bad. But my advice is, if you're going to have a partner, and I hope you really like them and that it lasts forever, but have an exit strategy built into your shareholders agreement that hopefully you never have to look at. Because what ended up happening for Bart and I was, because we didn't have that, it added a lot more strain and stress. There was no mechanism for decision making or pressure beyond, like, basically we had a gun to each other's heads and couldn't pull the trigger. His gun to my, I'm speaking just in the worst case scenario, his gun to my head was, well, if you don't give me what I want, I will just hold on to my shares and stop working and drag you down with me. And because we're 50-50, I won't approve salary. I also won't approve you to take away my salary. So I couldn't execute my plan. At the same time, I had the same gun to his head. You know, I had, because I'm the managing partner in the business and couldn't be removed as that role without a lawsuit. You know, there were things that I could have done. Not that again, you don't ever want to be there, but my advice is have a shareholders agreement, because very lucky that I had the partner I have, the friend I have, because it could have gone south a few times. And there were moments. So that's one. Two, decide on as much as possible before you involve the lawyers. Right? So I thought we had come to an agreement. And we had, by the way, and even, you know, the intricacies of a deal, of a separation, of a dissolution, of liability, you can't, I mean, I didn't, and think Bart was surprised too at some of the detail that's required, especially if the business is going to continue. If the business is going to dissolve, that's different. Or if you're going to sell, that's different. But because I wanted to continue, I had to handle things like, what is he liable for should something go wrong? Stuff you never want to think about. Taxes, right? Like, both our names are on as directors. E&O insurance has to continue for a certain amount of time. Untangling things like cell phones, like, you know, basic stuff. And there were a couple of moments where it's funny now, but it wasn't funny then. We were really angry with each other, and what we realized when we were like talking through our lawyers at one point, as if, again, divorce, right? And I can remember, he called me or I called him, it doesn't matter. And I said, I'm so mad at you. And he's like, I'm pissed at you too. I'm like, well, I'm glad we figured that out. Now what's the problem? And it doesn't matter what it was. It turns out that it was a thing that was really important to him, but that I thought, not that it wasn't important, but I was like, thought we'd figured it out. I was like, no, it's not all important to me. And once we said that, I was like, cool, whatever you want, as long as I can have whatever the thing. He's like, yeah, that's fine. I'm like, so what are we fighting about? He's like, I don't know. So we wrote a letter to the lawyers and it got taken care of, but it took a while to get there. So try and figure out as much as you can before you approach the lawyers. That's a big bill that I've got that I'm paying, or the company's paying. What else? Do your best to keep your books in order, keeps your accounting down. Also makes it easier to fund the buy. So our buyout was partially funded through a loan, and because we had good bookkeeping and records that way into the past, that made that much more, much simpler to go and get a good deal there. And then there was, I don't know, what else? Does that answer you? I
think it definitely did. No, I mean, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that, it's preparing, even though you hope not to have to use some of these things. It's like, some of this preparation for the worst case scenario, or just, maybe just like a crummy situation to happen. Yeah. Like, if you prepare for that, then hopefully it never happens, but at least you've prepared for it. And so, yeah.
I was going to say, listen, your partnership is going to dissolve. I mean, I was going to die at some point. I mean, we're like, worst case
scenario. Yeah, one way or the other.
One way or the other, your partnership's going to end. So structure it, or you need to have an agreement on what's going to happen in certain things you don't want to think about: death, disability, divorce, whatever, mental issues, mental incapacity. Apologies, not mental. Issues. pertaining to stress. And those are stuff you don't think about when you're 24, 25, 26, but that really matter when you're 40, 43, 40,
burnout, things like that. Probably.
Burnout, in situations where one partner wants to take a long break.
Yeah.
What do you do? Stuff like that. I mean, you think about it now, and it's all templated. I mean, you can go and get it. ChatGPT's a hell of a drug. And, you can get all that looked at and just think it through, write it down, and revisit it every couple of years, because it's going to happen. You are going to stop being partners at some point.
Yeah.
Or what happens when you add a partner, right? That was another thing, is that a couple of times through our working together, we had the opportunity to discuss maybe we add a partner, and we had no mechanism to figure out how to do that. So, and the other thing I'll say is, if you've got a great partner, and if you're the one that wants to stay, as soon as possible, start implementing your plan. So I'm grateful for the fact that I was permitted, and I was, to effectively, almost like a relay handoff, he let me start running before he stopped. He let me promote people up into a leadership team, hire a COO, didn't get in the way of me starting my plan, even though he was still technically on the register as a director. And again, I credit that back to the fact that we genuinely wanted to see each other succeed, and he really did just want to step back. I know that stories I've heard, that's not always going to be the case, but as soon as possible, if you're the one staying, start running. Don't wait until the final closing date. It's too late.
Yeah, you basically need to get the ball rolling, so that on that closing date, it's like you can keep on going. You're not just, that's not the starting line. It's almost like the finish line.
It's like, I equate it to, if you ever run a marathon or a large group race, your time doesn't start till you cross the line, but if you start, you're back in the pack. So there's a good half a mile before you even get to the start line. And that's how I felt. I think my starter pistol went off February 1st, but I've been running for a good 3 months.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, one of the other things that we'd talked about was kind of how your Cloudflare partnership kind of happened by accident, and kind of ended up with ZeroArc. Can you tell? I mean, I'm sure other agencies have similar stories where kind of some happy accidents led to them starting a new side of their business or something like that. So, can you tell a little bit about kind of how things unfolded there?
I've been thinking about this since our chat before, and how am I going to present this without getting a phone call from someone at Cloudflare going, no, and just hanging up. So like I'm sure many of us, many of your listeners and watchers, viewers, we use Cloudflare, that mainly at the time we used it for their free service to host DNS. Simply as a DNS manager, it's the best DNS manager I've ever experienced. It comes with a ton of out of the box protections, way better than GoDaddy or any of those easy DNS, that basic stuff. And anyone that wants to, I'll fight anyone on that, no problem. But basically, that's what we used it for. And a couple of $20 accounts when we needed page rules or something. And I was with so what happened was, I had cobbled together 3 nights and 4 days with my wife, so someone else watching the kids, and we went to just a resort. It was in the Dominican, but we just, whatever was cheap and available. And on day 2, I start getting alerts that our largest client's website is down, but I'm away and I've got a team and they're handling it. And then I start getting pings on Slack that they can't bring it back up. And they've diagnosed the issue to basically the hosting company is saying that Cloudflare has banned the domain from their network. But that didn't make any sense, because my client doesn't use Cloudflare. We had a subdomain for a test that we built internally on a free Cloudflare account, or on a $20 Cloudflare account, but it was nothing. You know what I mean? Their domain wasn't pointed at us. There was no name server. It was an internal test, and it turns out what had happened was Cloudflare had a billing error and undercharged our account by $4, and then immediately cut off all the domains that were in that account. Now, all of them were test domains, so it didn't really matter, except one of them was a sub of it was like sub.test.client.com. And they banned the domain, and the host happened to use Cloudflare's Edge network for their network. And if you have a free plan with Cloudflare, there's no support. If you have a $20 plan with Cloudflare, there's no support. And it took, it took some all caps lock emails written at 30,000 feet. Thank you, Air Canada, for having Wi-Fi. That basically said, if I land and my client is not online, you could explain it to my lawyer and their lawyer, because I'm heading to Bay Street. I'm going to Bay Street and I'm going to see my lawyer from the airport. This is because by that point we diagnosed that it was a silly problem, and it was an honest to God mistake. I mean, it was a weird edge case, and something that it was a farce. It was farcical. It was like if at any point one of a dozen things hadn't happened, nothing. This whole thing wouldn't have occurred. So we get on a phone call with Cloudflare and the host and the VP at the hosting company and us. And, I put on my mean eyes from Mr. Potato Head.
Bad cop.
My bad cop. I was like, I don't care what they say. I'm going to be angry. And I was pissed. And, we had the phone call fine, and it got fixed. And I got a phone call about an hour later from someone senior at Cloudflare. And like, Ben, you're really passionate about your clients. And I was like, oh God, I'm gonna have to apologize, because this guy's, I really kind of went over the top. I took a giant strip off these guys. And before I could get that out, he said, you should consider being part of our partner program, which stunned me. And by the way, the mark of an absolutely excellent salesperson, because he realized I was emotionally invested, and began to explain to me how their partner program worked. And I think he thought, because I was maybe just the way I was speaking, that we were bigger than we were. And so when I expressed to him how big we were at the end, he's like, oh, okay, well, bring us a logo and we'll talk. Because being part of their partner program is a big deal. Being a managed service partner, being referred by them, having, there's a lot of benefits that come with it. And I, again, if anyone wants to talk about it, I'm a big fan. But we ended up, they brought us this opportunity. I brought it to my account team. I have one guy. And we looked at it, and we got the client on the phone, and we said, how by the way, it was the client that they royalties screwed up with. Yeah. And I said, remember the time when they took out all your websites? Would you consider using them for your, for zero trust and security? And lo and behold, yes. And so how you're not supposed to test anything new with your biggest client?
Well,
so anyway, yeah. It wasn't new, because in the sense that we didn't know what we were doing, because we've been working with this client, first of all, for 5 or 6 years, and we certainly understood web security, and we understand domain security and everything. There were a couple of new things that we learned, but we were able to leverage that expertise. And from that, I said, maybe we should take a look at this opportunity to address a certain part of the market. And Cloudflare, we now have this partnership with Cloudflare. We're a managed services partner of theirs. We're a reseller of theirs. And we've started to build a practice around it. And so, yeah, I mean, just being passionate about my clients and about getting things done right, and everyone owning up to their mistakes, sort of landed us with this opportunity, and we took it.
Yeah, and that's ZeroArc, right? ZeroArc is the managed services.
Right.
For Cloudflare specifically?
Yeah. So ZeroArc was born out of that. It's not Cloudflare only, but it's certainly at the moment we're powered by Cloudflare. We call it, end to edge. It's just simpler. Gotcha. It really replaces like 15 services. It's amazing. But and then we're using AI. One of the big decisions was, is it an AI organization or is it AI enabled? Or it's AI enabled, right? Still need humans. And, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Well, one of the things we talked about was that that's kind of more of a channel partner model.
Yeah.
Where agencies are like selling it for you. Can you talk a little bit about like how you landed on that model and kind of your thinking there?
Yeah, well, I mean, so the agency partner program. I've always felt like agencies. First of all, I think agencies are, myself included, I don't want to say scrambling, but everyone is concerned about recurring revenue. It's that darn AI thing again, right? So, how are we going to price this? What's going to happen to my recurring revenue? And how are we going to be stable? Because agencies, really, the trick that no one tells you is figure out how to be stable so that you can do the fun things that you really want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens if that stability goes away? So you've got to be prepared for it. So that came into my mind, and then the fact that none of these managed security organizations, think of Arctic Wolf, Arctic, Accenture, I'm talking about the big ones, even the mid-sized ones, none of them have an agency liaison program that says that respects the fact that creative and even digital web agencies who own these amazing relationships, and that should absolutely be respected and taken care of for, end right where security really begins. And if you think about the creative agency that also does web, they're sitting in the room with the client, and the director of marketing says, "Oh, by the way, our emails keep getting spoofed," right? And the director, even the creative director, or even the web guy goes, "Oh yeah, that's terrible. We should turn on DMARC." And that's the end of the conversation. But that should just be the beginning of the conversation, because that's a real problem. There's a lot to dig in there, and that can be solved relatively inexpensively. But no one has bothered to call up the agencies and say, "By the way, when you hear these things, like my email's being spoofed, IT is giving me problems when I want to change a domain name, and hosting, we've got problems with caching, we've got problems with," like, marketing actually agencies touch a lot of things that could be made simpler. And when I hear from agency owners, they're like, "I wish I'd have to deal with hosting," for example. And that's why they do with great managed hosts like WP Engine, but that's for WordPress only. So what do you do? And we realized in looking at the offering that Cloudflare has, that agencies really just need a little bit of education about the opportunity. Just step out of that free plan, that $20 plan, and look what they can do. AI enablement is a big part of that. You look at like Cloudflare's AI gateway system, AI workers. Anyone that hasn't investigated it and is building their own AI stuff, I mean, you guys are missing the boat. But what we're offering is saying, look, we have this partnership, we have this agreement with Cloudflare, and we're going to split the revenue from our, we're going to offer a percentage of the managed services and a very big percentage of the net revenue off of reselling, if we can work with agencies to be introduced to their clients. And this is how we've grown for years, by the way, because we're a managed web DevOps team only. We've never had design. We've never done branding or marketing. And so, but we understand how to manage clients. And I've got a roster of partners who trust us with their clients because they do SEO and we handle the web, right?
Yeah.
For example, or they do design and we do web. And so we're just taking that model and moving it over and saying, we know how to work with clients. We don't white label. When it comes to security, we're not white labeling. But what we're saying to agencies is you can make an extra, hundreds to thousands of dollars a month. I know this is going to sound like a Ron Popeil pasta maker thing, but there you go. For literally doing nothing once it's sold, and we'll take care of it. Now I know that's easier said than done. There's a lot of faith, and we've got to engender that trust with our partners. But I'm looking for 10 to get started with. I've got a couple already. The Bureau of Digital has been a great help, and that's what we're building, because there's a lot of opportunity there for them, and then a lot of opportunity for us.
Yeah, that's a super interesting model. You mentioned early on in your answer there just about how kind of the AI component, and I know that's kind of the big elephant in the room in a lot of agencies right now.
Yeah.
One of the things you said in our early conversation is, while other agencies and other businesses in general are trying to do more with less, like let's cut staff and then, replace them with AI. Your philosophy is a little more like do more with more rather than do more with less.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, kind of, what does that look like in practice? Just unpack that.
Sure. So there is a great saying from a woman named Iris Apfel, who is no longer with us, but everyone should look her up. Her saying was more is more, less is a bore. And she's this like big fashion icon. And my wife put a picture of her in our powder room in our house with this saying on it, and we love it. And when I had to go to my team and present this thing around, Bart's leaving, but by the way, we have a great plan, and here's what it is. One of the things and how AI is going to be our warp thread. And for any of you that have ever done any sewing or seamstress work, a warp thread is the piece of thread that runs through a garment and holds it together. So it's not a Star Trek reference; it's literally a thing. And what I said to them was, look, I'm going to invest. Bart's going, and I'm going to invest. We're going to put the money. I'm going to keep the money in the business, and my commitment to you is that I'm going to hire. We're going to hire. We're going to grow, and what I'm asking from you is, in exchange for that investment, and in growing your team and our benefits and our opportunities, you're going to look to do more with the tools that are amazing. These tools are incredible.
Yeah.
So you do more, and I'm going to do more, and we're going to be able to provide more to our clients with more resources and with more staff. Now, I'm not saying that the 5,000 person company, isn't going to need to trim some fat, but we're not that, right? We're a 12 person agency looking to be 30. I really feel like if we've got this huge force multiplier, which is Claude Code, and or pick your AI poison, right? There's so many workflows and whatnot. Rarely in history, the good, fast, and cheap. You can pick two. You heard that, obvious, right? Every once in a while, something comes along that is better, faster, and cheaper. Every so often, the internet was that thing, right?
Yeah.
AI is that. It's making it faster, cheaper, and better all at the same time. And I'm sure I'm going to get some hate mail around the better part, but you know what? I'll fight people on that too, because it's allowing people space to, if you're using it right, it's allowing you space to think and do more and be more productive. So that's what I've challenged my team with, and that's my philosophy on it. I don't see AI I know Andreessen Horowitz thinks that Gen AI is already here, and great, but or AGI, right? Sorry, AGI, right? General intelligence is here, not Gen AI. Sorry. But I think we've got a little bit of time before we're all replaceable by robots, like a significant amount of time. And in the meantime, it's going to be the organizations that invest in these tools and these workflows and take their years of proven process.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the key, by the way, right? Because you have to know where you're going and what the problem is and where you want to be. And if you know the problem and you know where you want to be, AI is going to shorten that or kill that. That chasm's gone. You're going to walk. Yep. Right. And there's all kinds of questions. What does that mean for the developer? Who becomes the really important bottleneck? If it's not the developer, is it the product manager? And then developers become product managers. Like, there's a whole obviously debate about and it's going to shake itself out. But the reality is, great talent is still very valuable. Problem solving, incredibly valuable. Curiosity is incredibly valuable. These tools just make it faster, and allow for more iteration. And I'm really excited about that. So we're going to do more with more. And I think, we've chosen our more to be managed security because we see that as a great opportunity. It excites us. We love talking about, zero trust and data loss prevention. That's what gets us going. But whatever it is, I'm watching my friend TJ is building this awesome design system that's going to kick Figma's ass. And that's what he's doing with AI, and everyone's going to find stuff to do. And I'm excited to see what happens. But that's, I challenge my team to do more, and I'm putting our collective money where my mouth is, and saying I'm going to invest along with you. And I'm excited about it.
Yeah. No, it's super fascinating to me. One of the things I've been thinking about lately is, um, as the models get more and more sophisticated, the things we're going to start running into is basically the speed of being able to process, you know,
Yeah,
and so like I think we're going to have some hardware issues pretty soon, or like power consumption issues, because like even the latest sort of hiccup with Anthropic, where they're basically having to kind of throttle how much like people are doing with multiple agents on one account, because people were basically burning thousands of dollars worth of
yeah,
I don't know what you
tokens.
call it, like tokens on with a $200 account
Yeah,
or
yeah,
something.
yeah.
So
I I think it's not just that. You're talking about the limits we're going to hit with hardware. We're going to hit human limits and economic limits before that happens, and I think we've already hit them. And what I mean is, on the economic side, businesses are still businesses, and they're going to have to figure out how to absorb the benefits of all these new tools. And right now, I mean, OpenClaw, for example, the world's best Trojan virus. I'm not kidding. I think 20% of enterprise had it installed on somewhere on their network in the first 3 weeks. That's very scary, and we should
yeah,
all be scared. But that's a conversation for another day. Um, the fact that all these tools are available is great. Businesses need to figure out how to make money with them, or all they are fun tools. Which is why, by the way, I think agencies are where I want to focus, because we're the first line. We always are. Great
mhm,
ideas, innovations. We're the ones showing our clients, here's what you can do with that new thing that you didn't know you could do, right? But I digress. So that we're going to hit this an economic limit, but also human limits. We're still human. We buy from humans. We want relationships. We're social animals. I hope that doesn't ever change. And um, our brains can only hold and process so much. And I know we're all in awe of the people that are always in the news that seem to be able to do so much more, and that's great. There's always going to be that, but I'm in the middle. I know you're above slightly the middle, and
yeah,
when it comes to intelligence, and I can only handle so much, and we all are going to need to focus. There's still going to be room for people to be good at what they're good at, and have what I hope we don't lose is really great understanding, and practical, the benefits of experience and the benefits of study and knowledge isn't going away. When I code an app, I very quickly, when I started building apps with Claude Code, and building a PRD, I very quickly started looking at what was going on and realized, oh, this is why a great developer is so important, right?
mm,
Understanding how to scaffold this stuff and seed in their heads. Yes, you can have 500 new ideas, but we can only execute one great, two at a time.
yeah,
So I think we're going to, yes, hardware limits, but I think we're also going to hit the limits of just reality,
yeah.
and the hype machine is going to keep going. But what was it they said? Accenture, somewhat, maybe IBM just put out a report that they expect by 2028, most enterprise will have scaled back significantly from what they're investing in now on AI,
Hmm.
because they don't see the economic benefit yet.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, time will tell. I'm hoping it's just one of those things like any other sort of technological leap where, yes, there's a little bit of a shakeup as far as in the near term of like, jobs and things like that. But a lot of those people end up reskilling into some of the things that are become more in demand.
Yeah.
Like I know, I live not too far from farmland, and you know, back in the day, you'd have all sorts of tractors that were doing harvest, and then they built these giant combines, and you can run a combine with an iPad and like one person in there, whereas it used to take a whole bunch of people, and like now they have like GPS where you're not overlapping where you've already plowed and things like that. Like that's technology that um, reduced the amount of people needed, but also it expands the amount of farmland that can be harvested, so we can provide more food. Um,
Oh yeah.
so,
It's
like there's things like that. So there's there's the upside, or, well, I mean, there's all sorts of examples. So my thinking is that hopefully I don't get replaced, but if I do, hopefully I can be reskilled into something that is valuable. So that's a part of the reason I'm just trying to stay on top of everything that's happening with it these days.
Maybe we've been replaced already, and we're just two avatars talking. I'm kidding. It's going to be messy for sure. But speaking as somebody who's in the mess, that's where the fun is. I realize that a lot of people are going to. It's going to be stressful, and there's a lot of change coming. But again, because we're humans, we're going to put the brakes on it naturally, and hopefully safely. And yeah, I mean, it's incredible. We could do I'm sure we could do another 3 hours on AI, but it's so much fun. Just finally being able to take things. I feel like what it must be like if you've got someone who if you're someone that loves music but can't play an instrument, but like come up with new tunes in their head. I feel like I'm finally able to get the music out of my head.
Yeah.
I'm finally able to, because I've learned a lot over the last 6 months about creating a PRD and whatever, but I'm finally able to take these ideas I've had and really test them before I even say to a dev, it might be fun, and get the eye roll. And
the thing is you can test something out, you can validate or like invalidate really quickly,
really fast.
Like that's the thing is like all of a sudden the things where you're like, oh, I am just such a genius with this killer idea. And you can be like, is this really a killer idea? You're like, let's find out. And you can find out real quickly. Oh, actually, this wasn't as good of an idea as I thought.
The other thing it does is it accelerates also. If you're someone who is really good at bringing things to market, then this is going to make you even faster. But if you're somebody who's always just had an idea and never really done anything with it, and all it's going to do is give you more ideas to do nothing with. Like it still requires some know-how, some motivation, some understanding. For me to build, like I replaced my spreadsheets with a cash flow app internally called Tally. It's our app. I'm not selling it. I just built. A friend of mine said to me, "Oh, you should sell this." I'm like, I have no idea how to sell software. Like that is a whole other game.
Yeah.
Right. I sell managed services and we do it really well. And I love clients and I love client management and that, but I'm not all of a sudden going to be a SaaS company because Claude Code let me build a cash flow application. Like Intuit is a massive company and QuickBooks requires thousands of people. I don't think that's going to change. It's so. Yeah.
No, it's so true. Well, honestly, this has been a super fun conversation. I really appreciate your transparency, especially because talking about a lot of the challenge around partnerships and when those things start diverging. I think it's going to be really applicable for a lot of agency founders out there. So for folks that want to connect with you and get to know you better, maybe work with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, or I'm just Ben at fpdigital.io or ZeroArc.io. Fire me an email. I'm happy to talk to, if anything I said here, if you want to know more about, partnerships, selling your agency, buying an agency, whatever, I've been through 13, 14 years of it. Happy to share all the mistakes and hopefully you'll make different mistakes.
It's true. Everyone's going to make them. It's just hopefully they're not,
don't make my mistakes. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on the show. Hope you have a good one.
Thanks for having me. Have a good one. Bye.